here, or whatever we call it. So welcome once again to the Clear Admit Deferred Enrollment MBA webinar. We're going to try to share a ton of insights today about deferred enrollment programs. My name's Graham. I am the co-founder of Clear Admit, and I'm going to moderate today's session. But let me introduce each of our panelists really briefly here so you know who you're going to hear from today. First up, we have Cindy Millette. She's a Senior Associate Director of Full-Time MBA Admissions over at Berkeley Haas. Welcome, Cindy.
Nice to be here. Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. We're also going to hear today from Tony Gomez, who's a Senior Associate Director of Master's Admissions over at Carnegie Mellon Tepper. Welcome, Tony.
Graham, it's a pleasure to be here as always. Thank you.
It's great to have you. We're also going to hear from Christine Friedman, and she is the Deferred Enrollment Director at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Graham. Thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. We've also got Jake Kohler, who's the director of the Mwellis Advanced Access Program at Wharton. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks for having me. Excited to talk.
And Jake, I feel like I always mispronounce this. So can you pronounce the name of the Advanced Access Program for me, just so I get it right once and for all?
Mwellis Advanced Access Program.
Mwellis. Okay, excellent. And then last but not least, we're also going to hear today from Catherine Alford. She is the Director of Admissions for the Future Year Scholars Program at UVA Darden. Hey, Catherine.
Hey, Graham. Such a fun group of panelists. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. The way that we've structured this today is we have a number of questions for our panelists. Each school is also going to have a little bit of time to share specific details about their program. And then at the end of the main session, our panelists have been kind enough to agree to jump into breakouts where you can ask them questions. So as a result of that, we're going to ask you to hold your questions until the end, because you'll be able to pop off and jump into these breakout rooms with each of our panelists and ask questions then. But otherwise, I think we should get started. And so I want to first turn to Cindy. And well, actually, I guess before we do that, I did want to say a word just about the difference between the traditional MBA application process and these sort of early access or deferred MBA programs. And I say that because I know many of you are joining us from, you're still an undergrad, and this is a relatively new pathway into business school. So for example, when I got my MBA, the only way to do it was you went to college, you went off and worked for several years, and then you would apply to business school. And the beauty of deferred MBA programs is that you get to apply while you're still a senior in college, or in some cases, if you've gone directly into a master's program straight from undergrad, you'd be applying from that program. But in any event, you apply direct, you get an offer, and then you go off and you work with that security of knowing that you have a spot in an MBA program. And most of these schools will learn more about it, but most of them allow you to work for anywhere from 2 to 5 years. So it's a really interesting path in that it allows you to sort of like pre-book a seat at a great MBA program. Whereas when I was working, I had no idea where I would end up, and there's a lot of kind of stress associated with that. So it sort of changes the calculus of this. So that's my kind of 2 cents on what a deferred MBA is. I'm sure that our panelists will do a much better job of explaining that and offering more of the details of the mechanics of applying. But why don't we, to sort of dive into that, let's turn first to Cindy at Berkeley. And I wanted to ask you, so we now understand sort of what these programs are, but why would someone consider a deferred MBA, and what's the benefit to the student for doing it this way?
Yeah, so I think gaining admissions to a top MBA program really gives you the opportunity to innovate professionally. So a deferred MBA program is really this new pathway, as you mentioned, that bypasses sometimes a roadblock that prevents undergrads from applying to an MBA, which is the work experience part of it. But this route also relieves some of the stress and intimidation that many college seniors and some graduate students may feel while planning their first step towards following graduation. So candidates can apply to the program before exiting their undergrad, knowing that they can experiment and try new things professionally, knowing that they have this MBA in their back pocket. So deferred programs really encourage valuable early networking with early professionals to the school, to exclusive networking events, newsletters, closed social media groups. So also, I think just as part of YMBA, it's open lot of doors to people. It could be beneficial, can help you pursue opportunities with various industries and functions.
Yeah, well said. And I think, I'm just remembering now, I remember I walked into the admissions office of an MBA program when I was still a student in undergrad, because I had this inkling that maybe someday I would go get an MBA. And they kind of looked at me and said, you need to go work for a few years. Like, why not? They were nice, but there was a little bit of like, why are you here? You need to wait. So it's really great to have this opportunity. I have another question, and this one I'm going to direct at Tony from Carnegie Mellon University, Tepper. Would you be willing to kind of comment on what it is that you're looking for? And I ask that because clearly someone applying to business school who's still an undergrad has a different sort of profile, than somebody who's been out in the workforce for a few years. So how do you guys assess, like, what are you looking for?
Yeah, no, good question. So in our deferred MBA candidates, we're looking for people who um, have strong potential in three areas, right? So we're looking at your leadership potential, your academic prowess, and your commitment to your future career, right? Your impactful future career. So that academic excellence, we're looking for people who've demonstrated success in a rigorous undergraduate program. For Tepper specifically, we're looking at individuals from US-based institutions. We're looking through your transcript for things like intellectual curiosity. What does that range of electives look like that you've been taking, right? We're looking at the capacity for you to thrive within our MBA program, which is quantitatively focused. So do you have that quant background to get through our core curriculum? Of course, we're looking for a strong GPA, competitive test scores. Those can always help demonstrate the readiness. Your leadership potential, right? Do you have that proven track record of leadership as an undergrad, whether it's in student organizations, work settings, or personal projects that you've been working on? We want to see examples of what you've done that go beyond what your current expectations are to lead at your level, that made an impact and how you've helped inspire others. And that commitment to impactful careers, we know that you all are just sort of exploring what's out there as a college senior, right? But we're hoping that, our competitive applicants often have this well-articulated career vision of what they want to be doing. They're able to create this thoughtful connection between goals, past experiences, and that MBA. Show us how all three of those elements are tying together and how you're going to benefit from that MBA experience as you continue to grow.
Excellent. Yeah, really well said. And I think it is, it's good to know that, like, the thing that you said that really struck me is this idea that you guys know where someone should be or could be at this phase, when they're still in university. And so their expectations there, and you're not measuring them in the same exact way you would measure someone who has, 5 years of work experience at a Fortune 500 company or something. So that's really helpful. I want to turn to Jake. We have a question about letters of recommendation. And I'm really curious on this one, just because I know when you apply to business school after you've been working for many years, it's sort of a no-brainer. You get recs from your bosses or, a past job. But how does it work in this instance where people maybe don't have full-time work experience beyond, internships and stuff?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And such as the case for deferred enrollments, like there's a little bit more flexibility that you might be able to utilize here. The broad insights I tend to give, again, the most general piece would be like anybody who's observed you in some sort of advisory capacity. That could be an internship supervisor. It could be a teacher who you've done research with, or maybe taught one of your classes. Maybe it's a club or a community organization leader who's managed some of the involvements you've had. Anybody who's observed you in an advisory capacity that is not a parent can be a really, really good resource for you. To get to the second, or maybe like the only exception to which you may want to consider this is some schools may articulate that they have preferences of who they want you to respond, or what combinations of people. So I think checking each school's website to make sure you're understanding what is their specific recommendation. Again, all of whom will be some sort of advisory capacity, but there may be a school that says, we encourage you to choose one person with a little bit more academic orientation, one person with a little bit more professional orientation. Maybe a school will preference some combination of that. So make sure you know that for each of the schools to which you apply in this capacity. And then my only advice, I maybe have one or two other pieces of advice when approaching this. First of which I think in general matters, the quality of the substance of the writing somebody offers is much more important than the title that they have. So I think about who has actually observed you navigate teams and or teamwork, project and project execution, the ability to navigate hurdles and obstacles, and kind of the person who you've seen has observed you do things that business schools value: collaboration, teamwork, leadership, grit, resilience, coachability. Somebody who can talk about that with substance, I think is useful. Again, framing within whatever the schools may ask of you, and as far as their recommendations. And then the only other piece of advice that I will offer is there are some recommenders who may come back to you and say yes, I'm happy to write on your behalf, but can you give me some insights, or can you give me your resume, or can you share some of the bullets that you may want me to hit upon? And I will say it's fine to, I think it's great to give a resume. It's great to give some insights as to some of the bullets that they may capture. I will just tell you, if a recommender says, can you write the letter and I'll sign it? Don't ask that. Ask ultimately for somebody else, because number one, I don't think that's particularly that's not that's not the purpose of this process. But I would say as a candidate, if a recommender is asking basically for you to write it, the negative consequence for you is we then see two letters of recommendation that look very, very similar, and that starts raising some red flags. So it's not a common thing, but I think you can give some bullet points. You can try to share with a recommender, these are some of the things that I think you would have observed me do. I think could be really great to add in. And yeah, you're in really good shape. I think the only other thing, actually, I'm going to be quiet after this. The only other piece of advice that I'd offer is there's probably 8 people that come to each of your minds as far as people who could be good sources of letters of recommendation. The difference between who you pick among those 8 is not going to have a categorical difference in the admissions decision. So you have lots of people to choose from. Pick whoever you think is good, and know that any 2 of that permutation of 8 people or so are going to be really, really positive contributors. So don't put too much pressure of picking the right person. Pick good people who fit the needs of the school's recommendations.
Yeah, wow, a lot of really great advice there, Jake. And I think it's funny because I think candidates think when the recommender comes to them and says, you write it, I'll sign it. They're like, wow, dream come true. I can make this thing. But I know as a former admissions reader that you can spot those a mile away. And often I just find that the actual recommender has things to say that the candidate would never have thought to sort of bring up. And it just makes a file that much more rich and interesting to go through. Can I just get a show of hands from our panelists? How many of you allow for an academic letter of recommendation? Could someone go to a professor, or is it really okay? So Christine's not raising her hand. So,
So it's an it depends answer.
Okay, that's why. Yeah. So I think to Jake's point, check each school's website and understand what their recommendations are around letters of recommendation. All right, let's move on though. We have a question now for Christine. And this one is just sort of a general thing. I mean, candidates many of them are seniors in college right now. And what would you tell someone who's sort of getting ready to apply? And I guess I know many of you have different deadlines, but there are definitely a wave of deadlines in the spring. And so assuming someone has, a handful of months at their disposal, what should they be doing if they're planning to apply?
All right, thanks, Graham. I'm going to address the college seniors. on the call, and anyone who may be a graduate student who went straight through. I'm going to talk to you first, and then I'd love to talk to some of the junior classmen as well, because I think there's additional things that you can be thinking about if you're in the earlier stages of planning to potentially apply for deferred enrollment. To my seniors and grad students, keep doing what you're doing. You're showing up at events like this. You're taking the time to learn about different programs. Keep doing that. Find ways to attend different events that the individual schools are hosting, because the better understanding you have about the opportunities and resources at these different schools, the easier it will be to answer some of the questions in those applications when we're asking you to identify why you're interested in our programs. I would say keep showing up to class, keep doing as good as you can in your studies. Start thinking about what your career might look like, both in the immediate after undergrad and how you might be thinking about utilizing the MBA to help you get to where you want to go next. Jake gave some great advice already about thinking about your recommenders. I'd say get a head start. If you're thinking about applying in those spring deadlines, around April, start early, either at the end of this autumn term or early in the winter. Start asking your recommenders so that you have plenty of time to write those really great positive letters for you. Jake gave some great advice in terms of who to think about asking. I would just add, of the people who know you, maybe it was a former supervisor at an internship, or maybe it's an academic advisor or an academic supervisor of one of the organizations you're a part of the people sort of in your orbit, who are going to be your biggest cheerleaders and the ones that are going to be sort of banging the table and convincing all of us why you would be such a great addition to our programs. And then give yourself some time and some grace and space to think about how you'll be answering the different essay questions. Every school will have a different question. Give yourself time to answer each of them. Don't try to just recycle and reuse one from one school or the other. We can certainly tell. So give yourself the time. And you'll be doing yourself a great service as you do. If you haven't taken one of the standardized tests yet, give yourself time to study. You've got winter breaks coming up. Not a bad time to at least carve out some space to start preparing and taking some of those practice exams so you can dive in and do that as you're getting ready to apply. So that's some general advice for people who are planning to apply this year. If we've got any junior classmen, any freshmen, sophomore, or juniors on the call, some general advice I'd like to share is, as you're thinking about declaring majors and how you want to be spending your time in the classroom, in school, study what you're curious about. Study the areas that you're going to get the most enjoyment out of, because you'll end up doing better performance-wise academically if you're doing the things you care about and are interested in. When it comes to extracurricular activities, don't simply think about how you might pad your resume for it to look good. Really get engaged in the things that matter to you. And for us, it's generally more important that we see commitment and engagement in an activity rather than just doing a lot of things. So we can certainly tell if you've just joined a bunch of clubs your last year and just recently got involved in a lot of different things, or maybe you've been involved early in your career and gotten involved in just one or two different activities during your time in school, but you've invested your time, you're really committed, and maybe you've risen up into a leadership role and had the chance to make a real impact. So those are some pieces of advice that I would give to some of our junior classmen who have a little bit more time to prepare.
Well, thanks, Christine. And I think you did raise a great point of getting a head start with your recommenders, kind of riffing off of what Jake said. I mean, they need time. And so telling them sooner rather than later is always a smart move. Let's move on. We have one more question in this sort of first section of the presentation today. And this one is for Catherine, who's been waiting very patiently at the end of the alphabet. So Catherine, these applications often ask about post-MBA goals. And as Christine was just talking about, candidates have to first think about, well, what are they going to do after they graduate, before they do the MBA, and then how are they going to use the MBA to get to that next phase? And so I wondered, do you have any advice about how someone might go about thinking about this? Because it feels very distant, right, when you're still a senior in college.
Sure, happy to answer that question, but first want to start by saying I'm not used to being at the end of the alphabet with the last name that starts with an A, so this is
that's right. Excellent.
I usually have to go first, so it's nice to change things up a little bit. So as an undergraduate student, there is no expectation that you know exactly where you're going to be in 10 years, let alone 2 years. What's more important is for you to think about your long-term goals, showing both ambition and flexibility. So you're trying to balance the two. I would encourage you to focus more on a broader career theme. Think about what part of the corporate world or the public sector is the place where you would like to make your impact, and then make sure that your experiences and interests support that goal. So you don't want to come up with a career goal that is unconnected to anything you've done in your past. So you should use your prior experiences to inform the space where you want to make an impact, and then think thoughtfully about how an MBA degree is going to help you get there. So we're not looking to see students who have a specific career goal. We're not looking to see people who want to make an impact only in consulting or only in finance. It's more important that your career goal is genuine to who you are and your interests and your background, and that you're able to show self-awareness and reflection and kind of a sense of direction.
Got it. And I guess, I mean, I think this may come up later, but one of the things I'm hoping we'll get into is just this idea that in some cases, an undergrad who's applying may already know where they're going in the short term. Like they may have a job offer based on an internship they did. And in some cases, they may not. And my understanding, and I'm already seeing some nodding heads, is that it doesn't matter. Like you don't have to have that job lined up. But we'll get into, I think there's a question maybe later about that. But this next part, though, that I'm really keen to get to is just about kind of the general logistics and some of the specifics with respect to your program. So I want to just kind of zip around. We'll start with Cindy again at Berkeley. And I just wanted to know, like, so first of all, very simple, like who's eligible? Because I know there's some differences there, whether, international, domestic, how if they can have work experience or not, if they have to be coming straight from school. And then the second question is just about something that's a highlight of the student experience in your program at Haas. And then finally, what do you do with the students once they've been accepted? Because they're going to be out in the workforce, but how are they kind of provided a community while they're in that deferral period?
Yes. So for eligibility, we take both international and domestic candidates. And so we take undergraduate students who are in their final year of study. So that would be graduation July 1st, 2024 and to September 30th, 2025. We also take graduate students without full-time employment who enrolled in their graduate program. So you have to have not had work experience. That's kind of key. As in regard to the highlight of a student experience in the MBA program, I would say an MBA is like a leadership lab. And Berkeley Haas is very intimate, small community. And so you feel like you're in a safe place to be able to develop your leadership, authentic voice. So it's an opportunity to develop your leadership skills. So for example, we do have 20 applied innovation courses. And this is an opportunity to work with real companies on real business problems. And so this really adds to your resume. It also develops those leadership skills. For one example of that is international business development, which is run kind of like a consulting company. And so you're placed on a team with an international company, a lot of times in developing countries. And so you work remotely on a project in the spring and then go in country in the first 2 weeks of the summer to finish that up and present your findings to the client. So I think that opportunity is really exciting. There are a lot of opportunities at different business programs, but that's one that I think is a highlight at UC Berkeley. And then in regard to the deferral period, you wait 2 to 5 years deferment once you're admitted to the program. And so you'll receive regular advisor check-ins with first Gabrielle, who is our Senior Associate Director of Admission for the Accelerated Access Program. And so you'll also get virtual programming with our career management group, for example. You're also looped into communication and networking events that happen on campus. For example, our diversity symposium. We have industry spotlights focused on different careers. We have mock classes. We have newsletters. And we also have a Slack group just for our accelerated access. So you really get to network with that community of early professionals. And I think that's a really great opportunity for you to be able to move into the MBA program when you feel like it's the best time for you through your advising sessions with FIRST.
Got it. Excellent. Yeah, thanks for running through that. Now let's turn to Tony, and we'll do the same thing with Carnegie Mellon Tepper. So who's eligible? Give us a highlight of the program, and then what are folks doing in that deferment period in terms of the community they get within Tepper?
Yeah, absolutely. So both domestic and international citizens are eligible for the deferred admissions program for Tepper, but you must have graduated from or currently enrolled in a U.S. institution to qualify. So that's that right there. One of the biggest highlights of our student experience is, I think, the interconnectivity that we have with our Sports Center for Entrepreneurship. This is the university's entrepreneurship center at CMU. It connects all 7 of the academic units at CMU, academic colleges, into one giant interdisciplinary hub for collaboration, innovation, and entrepreneurship. You are connected to a series of exclusive VCs if you have this sort of drive to become an entrepreneur. You're connected to our Connect series, which combine all of the colleges getting together and speaking about different areas of entrepreneurship that are important to our current budding entrepreneurs and our students in the program. It's just a really wonderful type of incubator and collaboration area for these types of students. And the support community that we provide, very much similar to what Berkeley had stated, right? We provide different Slack channels to our groups. They are students in our deferred program are welcome to attend our on-campus and virtual events as well that are focused on building community, but also on that professional development side.
Excellent. That's interesting. I didn't know about the sort of the way that the school has centralized entrepreneurship university-wide. That's really interesting. Let's now turn to Jake. And Jake, if you do the same with Wharton, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our eligibility will be a bit more like that shared by Berkeley Haas. So the way we frame it, again, very similar. It's any undergraduate or graduate student who will have graduated or completed their degree within 8 months of the application deadline. So end of April, and it's 8 months before or after that, you would be eligible for undergrads, period. For graduate students, that is the same way that was shared by my colleagues, so long as you have not had full-time work in between your undergraduate and graduate. So very, very similar in that regard. As far as the highlight of the student experience, and I love hearing about the things that happen in other schools too, what came to mind for me, so Wharton has a 3-week preterm before the full academic calendar starts. So our program starts last week of August, first week of September. 3 weeks before that, we have this like reacclimation into the academic environment. But a lot of what we actually do during that is just like personal development, leadership development. And the one piece I really want to call attention to is the first simulation course that you take at Wharton, in which we put you with your learning team, so 5 other students. You work in this simulation course as part of like an executive team. You serve as the C-suite for a realistic company. And what the flow of is like the morning you tend to have CEOs of companies do guest lectures alongside our faculty to talk about like different leadership principles, different executive managerial principles. And then in the afternoon, you navigate the simulation, basically making decisions off of an array of obstacles and challenges and opportunities that come up as a C-suite, each of you representing a different functionality within the organization. You make decisions that impacts the next day's flow of the simulation and so on and so forth over the course of this week. Again, morning, new CEO you meet with. Afternoon, you serve in that capacity. And at the very end, you either pitch or you navigate some sort of presentation as a community to a number of the Wharton alumni who kind of serve as potential investors or board members, et cetera. And it's just this really interesting way to navigate the entire network of Wharton, both alumni and the C-suite executives who serve as kind of the foundations of the development of the program. So a really cool way to start. And then about a week or two later, you then get into the full academic environment. For question 3, I'll just say kind of same. I think similar sort of Slack community, some independent conversations. We also have at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, we have our MBA career management team. The advisors will do a Q&A session to give some broader professional insights for people who are navigating, junctures where they may be contemplating a career pivot or trying to figure out how to get involved in a certain type of project, and just an opportunity to engage in that way. But again, very similar strategies. I think it's really great, these kind of asynchronous and synchronous opportunities that schools do during the deferral period to give you some more information as you're navigating a lot of work hours and you're at the start of your career.
Yeah, it does seem like a nice thing as well that, all of you are providing, where not only does someone get to pre-book their seat in an MBA program, but they get sort of advice and contact with the school while they're working, which again, I didn't have. When I went to business school, my first time on campus was, when I was admitted and went to a welcome event or something, right? So it's it's definitely, it seems like a great opportunity. Let's turn now to Christine at Stanford. Tell us a little bit about your answers to these questions.
Sure thing. So very similar to Haas and Wharton, who's eligible to apply for deferred enrollment to Stanford. If you are a college senior or if you're a grad student who went straight through from undergrad with no full-time work experience, no preferred majors or academic backgrounds, we are actually looking for students from all different experiences. So you would all be eligible to apply. One thing that is distinct, I think, for the Stanford MBA is that you are actually eligible to apply in any of our 3 application rounds. But I would say if you're thinking about keeping your options open, you're interested in a lot of these different programs, you are probably going to be looking at our round 3, since that most closely aligns with the other programs that have April deadlines. But if you are Stanford GSB or bust, certainly round 1 or round 2 would be an option for you. One highlight for the student experience, I would say at GSB, is our global experience requirement. So you actually need to satisfy a global experience requirement before you graduate from Stanford, but there are a lot of different ways that you can do that. The most popular being our student-led international study trips. Our global study trips take place usually over the winter and spring breaks for our students, so no time away from classes, but you will work with a group of 20 or 30 of your classmates and travel to different parts of the world. Each trip is actually student organized and student led, and each one has a theme around a topic or subject area that you'll be able to really dive into on the ground in these countries. Another popular way that our students can satisfy this requirement is through our global management immersion experience, which is essentially a 1-month-long summer internship experience that you're able to have abroad. And we are on the quarter system, so that means you can actually have a full-time internship here in the States and then still spend a month working abroad before school starts in year 2. So really unique feature, I think, of our program. And in terms of support and community, very similar to a lot of the other schools, we also have a Slack group for our students. You can do one-on-one advising with me whenever you may have questions. We also try to organize some social events and community building events for our defers during their time in the deferral period. So usually a couple times a year, we'll be doing some larger events in cities where we actually seem to have a good group of students kind of there at the same time. And then even in some of the smaller cities, we'll organize some small group dinners with alumni. So we really do invest in building that community. And what's really cool for our deferred students is that regardless of what year you end up enrolling, since you do have that flexibility between 2 and 4 years, you'll inevitably get to meet some future classmates, both within your own class and the other classes above and below you. So you actually will become some of the community builders within the campus communities that you ultimately join, which is, I think, a pretty special and unique opportunity.
Yeah, yet another attribute of deferred enrollment. You get to meet people above and below you by virtue of the fact that not everyone is going to take the same amount of time. Yeah, really interesting. And I will say one thing we haven't touched on, but that I think is the case, is that in most instances, these check-ins happen, and that's also an opportunity for you to alert the school that you're planning on matriculating like the following fall. So it's not, again, there are these regular check-ins. It's not like, and I'm pretty sure that they have to give you some notice, like they can't call you up in August and say they're showing up in a week to start the program, that it's usually a bit more mapped out, often maybe even like the prior fall that they have to tell you. But I think it varies program to program. But in any event, I did want to hear how this is all done at Darden. So let's turn to Catherine. And yeah, if you could answer these questions too.
Sure. So similar to the other programs, Darden's looking for students who are in their final year of either undergraduate or graduate study who do not have full-time work experience. And generally speaking, it's for students who graduate between October 1st, 2024 and September 30th, 2025, who will be eligible to apply to one of our two 2025 application deadlines. We have one in April and one in August. There's no advantage to applying earlier. It's just we have great students who learn about our program later. So we have an August deadline for those students. So many highlights, hard to pick just one, but I think where I landed is on the first year experience, student experience at Darden. We have a core curriculum that all students are required to go through that extends throughout the first 3 quarters of the year, which is almost the entire first year. And all of the courses that we teach in our core curriculum are going to be taught using the case study method. So if you are a learner who enjoys participating in the classroom, sharing your ideas and learning from the experiences of others, this might resonate with you. Every student's going through the same classes every day for the first 3 quarters, which really helps foster a tight-knit community. And one of the other neat things about having this required core is that many students find interests they didn't think they had. So I was talking to a student this weekend who's been taking accounting classes in her second year, and she said she never would have taken a single accounting class if she hadn't been asked to take it. So that's kind of neat to explore, to find some interests that you didn't realize you had. In terms of support for students who have been admitted through the deferral period, very similar to the other schools. Yesterday, I was sending out invitations to holiday parties that are hosted by alumni in various cities. We also provide some career coaching to students in our deferral period. And we also have a Discord channel where students can connect. I've seen students connect over similar job interests, and some of our future year scholars have found their next job through other future year scholars, which is always rewarding. So that's just the benefit of being part of a great network. Yeah, so I think those are all 3 responses.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Appreciate that. So just to remind everyone who's tuned in, each of our panelists has been kind enough to stick around a little bit at the end of the session and take your questions. We're going to give you links into the Zoom breakouts. So stay tuned for that. We just have a few questions that I wanted to ask our panelists. These actually came from the audience. So when people were registering, we collected some questions. And so we're going to, again, start with Cindy at Berkeley. So we'll kind of zip through these questions. But I always think it's great to just hear what's on the audience's mind. So the first question, so Cindy, yeah, how do you use, I think someone already alluded to this, but this sort of taking risks and exploring opportunities when you're a deferred candidate that the traditional MBA person or someone following the traditional path may not be able to. So do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of aligned to what we were talking about before on the benefits of this path. I think when you go back to thinking about the traditional path, you are kind of focused on pursuing these specific goals. You're thinking about your MBA application over those 2 to 5 years. And this opportunity really grants you that autonomy, creativity, to kind of develop your professional goals and exposure. You can experiment and try new things professionally, knowing that you have that MBA that you're working towards in 2 to 5 years. And you also can kind of think of it like a sponsorship that you have in trying different things, gaining leadership opportunities, your professional development. You can talk about that with your mentors because you have this focus on moving towards an MBA. So it really does provide that opportunity also through networking with other deferred MBA candidates. So you can learn more about other opportunities that are out there you can network with those people as well. And again, I think an MBA is really beneficial to help with various industries and functions. And so our early access admits are very well prepared for the program, and they can enter sometimes a little bit earlier than when you would see the traditional. Our average is about 5 years of work experience. But I think that maturity comes with really having that opportunity to know that you're focused on moving into the MBA and being able to talk with us about when would be the right time, so you're able to explore different things.
Excellent. Yeah. And I can't help but think that, what you were saying, when someone's working in a job and they see some other opportunity, but they're applying the traditional way, they might say, oh, what if that doesn't work out? Or I'm trying to, they have one eye on their application to business school and one eye on their career. And if you're only focusing on your career and following those paths, it just seems like there's a lot more freedom. Obviously, I think there probably are some limitations, like you can't be a couch potato and try to get the record score on a video game during your deferment period. I mean, maybe in your spare time, but not not as your job. But let's turn. We have another question, and this one is for Tony. And this is about what's the difference between. So I know Tepper also offers a master's in management. I think some of the other programs with us today do as well. But what's the difference between a master's in management and a deferred enrollment MBA? And any advice for this person who's maybe struggling to pick one versus the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So the deferred MBA, we believe at Tepper that you have this general idea of that specific industry that you want to pursue eventually, right? Maybe 5, 6, 7 years down the line, and you know that it is mainly just accessible through receiving the MBA, right? Like many jobs, if you look at careers as consultants, right, or possibly as product managers. The MSM for Tepper, we've designed this to be sort of an introduction to business for undergraduate students who did not specialize in business. Right. We want to make sure that you're able to get those business fundamentals through a 1-year specialized master's program to help you get your foot in the door for some of those more business area functions. Maybe you had your internship in engineering and decided, oh, this isn't exactly what I want to do. Right. Maybe you want to be more on the operations side of things. We believe that through our master's in management, you're able to do that after receiving, your formal education in business and taking our track in operations.
Got it. Yeah, well said. I think that's a really clear explanation. Our next question, which is going to be for Jake, is about candidates from overrepresented groups. So I think sometimes there are rumors out there that deferred enrollment favors the kind of, philosophy majors or the, someone who's a hard science major and not your traditional kind of business track person who's maybe a finance major or something. Is there any truth to that? And yeah, what would you advise someone who kind of, has a kind of more well-worn path towards business school?
Yeah, I totally get where this question comes from. And look, we kind of put it on ourselves, on our website. I think even Wharton's website. So people who've explore beyond the traditional paths of business school and yada yada. Looking at each of you right now, bureaucratic mist. We're trying to just make it as inclusive. We are trying to encourage people who have not necessarily gone the quote unquote traditional path. But the reality is so many people who have overrepresented group or quote unquote traditional path are applying and getting admission to this too. We are trying to make people see, when we place things on our website, when we try to open the aperture for people who are a philosophy major or a performing arts major or an engineer to see that an MBA could be useful to them. But that does not mean we're not also trying to attract people who maybe have taken the tried and true pathway towards business and kind of knew it from day one. So I want to start by just saying the framing of this, don't think you're part of the overrepresented group. The other consideration that I have is or maybe I'll answer the question directly. My advice is don't do anything different than anybody else. Share of your story and of your background and the facts of your application and what you're interested in doing and what you've done and how you've grown and learned from it. A lot of people will think of, oh, I'm part of an overrepresented group because of this one factor or these two factors. But when we look at applications, we're not looking at, oh, you fall into this bucket. We're looking at, oh, this is the circumstances and the experience that you had growing up. These are the major selections and the course selections and the navigation of your academic career. Here are the involvements that you've had both at home or in your personal life or in your extracurricular life or in your religious life, and just the involvements and where you spent time and had responsibilities outside of classroom and work. And here's the professional and pre-professional experiences you've had. And here are where your goals are. And when you actually like line up all of these things I had talked about, from your personal life to your academic life to your extracurricular life to your professional life to your goals, like there's not one of you that's the same. And that's the beauty of it. We get to just learn the facts of like really intelligent people, really ambitious people, you all, and you're all unique when we look at all the facts strung together. So yeah, you might fall into like a common group, but everything else is going to look different from the other people applying. So my advice is like, don't put extra pressure on yourself. Don't look for any additional advice. Share the things you've done, share where you've grown, share what skills you've developed, share what you're hoping to do, what goals you currently have, and then be really proud of what you're presenting and share how the schools may align to you, but don't do anything extra. Don't feel like you have to do anything extra in this process. We're here to learn about you.
That's really good to know. And I don't know that our attendees all know this, but you know, the MBA admissions process, whether it's deferred or traditional path into business school, is just so holistic and quite unique, I think, among graduate degrees. So it really is a look at the entirety of your candidacy and background. So we have a question now for Christine. I love this question. So, you know, sometimes people have done really interesting things, even like you know, maybe that summer between high school and university, or they had something that they've been doing maybe all their life, like a long-term activity or hobby. And I wondered, you know, this person's wondering, like, can they talk about that? Or is it like, no, life begins when I started as a freshman at university and I need to kind of keep to that domain when I'm filling out my application essays or, you know, that sort of stuff?
Well, life didn't begin the first day you arrived on campus. However, I would say for your MBA application, when you're thinking about talking about your accomplishments and your activities, for the most part, this will be focused on your undergrad experience and onward. Having said that, if there was something that you did during your high school years that was particularly impactful and meaningful to a community that you are a part of, I do think it is worth having the chance to mention that. And so what I mean by that is if you were really active in your hometown, right? In some, maybe you were involved with local government or the school board and you helped, you know, rally the community towards something and accomplish something together. Something that really stands out to you as particularly meaningful, something that you're particularly proud of, that may be worth highlighting because as you've heard, a lot of these schools are looking for your leadership potential. So if there are early glimmers of that potential popping even before you got to undergrad, it's worth finding a way to mention that. If it is simply that you were really active in an organization, if you're still active in it today, then there's a chance for you to, you know, note the start date, and we'll be able to see that that predates your college experience, but we'll also be able to then see that you've had this sustained involvement and commitment to this particular organization that you're a part of. So for the most part, it's going to be college and beyond, but just using that framework of if there's something that's particularly meaningful to you, make sure it's also meaningful to us.
Okay, great advice. We have one more audience question, and this one is for Catherine at UVA Darden. So this one is about what they can do during the deferred period. And it particularly pertains to like, could they take part-time classes or even earn like a part-time degree while working, I guess, presumably? Like, so is that allowed? I mean, that would be a lot, I guess, but is that allowed?
Yes. That's the
Okay.
answer.
Ah.
If you feel like you need additional education to achieve the goals that you set out for yourself, then, and the part-time degree is going to help you achieve that, then you are more than welcome to pursue a part-time degree. The main thing that our MBA programs are looking for is 2 to 4, 2 to 5 years of full-time professional experience prior to matriculation. So that's what you want to focus on.
So are there any exceptions? Like, is anyone on the group here, like raise your hand if your school has an exception to that? I mean, it sounds like it's okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. But obviously what I'm hearing, Catherine, is that you do have to be working. And so you can't, you know, sort of like just go to school and, you know, have a part-time job or something. It's
That's
got to
right.
be the other way around.
And I would
Yeah.
argue that you don't need another graduate degree besides an MBA. However, I can see somebody who maybe is really trying to fine tune some technical skills before they get to an MBA program to help them with their recruiting. Then I could see that being defensible. But other than that,
Mhm.
I wouldn't encourage you to do that.
Did you just write the new tagline for, the folks at GMAC or something? The MBA, the only degree you'll ever need, kind of. um, all right. So what we're going to do now, I think now what we're going to do is actually get everyone. Oh, yeah, applications. I knew there was one more thing and I couldn't remember what it was. So here are the deadlines that have been discussed. And I do want to mention that I know Christine had said that you can actually apply to any of Stanford's regular kind of deadline. So I believe there's one upcoming maybe in January, Christine. Is that right? And then the next one after that's April 8th, right, which is on this slide. So there's one earlier one for Stanford. I think in the case of everyone else, all of your dates are on screen. But just to give people a sense of, the timing here, it's great that you're all with us today because you do have some time. Even if you were applying to Stanford in January, you have some time to sort of get your ducks in a row and follow all the amazing advice that's been given out today. What I want to do now is let our panelists slip backstage. I do want to thank you all. I mean, it's just been so great. Cindy, Tony, Jake, Christine, and Catherine. It's been so much fun talking with them. We're going to let them slip backstage and take a breath, maybe have a drink of water before they bounce into breakouts. And if you're an attendee, we're going to give you links and set up the breakouts here momentarily. So stay with us. But thanks so much, guys, for all these great responses to the questions. While we're letting them jump backstage and get settled, I did want to just thank everyone for joining us today for the main part of this session. And I did want to just let you know that clearadmit.com is an amazing resource for people applying to business school, and it's all free, right? So we're not, our mission as a business is to just help candidates navigate the process to business school, whether you're deferred or even a traditional MBA candidate. I did also want to say one other thing, which is just that, we didn't comment on in today's session, but if you apply deferred and you don't get in, there's no penalty. You can go and work and you can apply to business school as you would ordinarily after you've worked for a few years. So there's no real downside risk to considering these deferred programs. Obviously, in any event, so spend some time at clearadmit.com because there's a ton of advice there. We have this tool called Livewire that gives updates, real-time updates on people's application process. There's an archive of past people's experience with interviews at these schools. And even, we kind of list the school's essay questions and try to provide advice as you think about how you might write essays. Avail yourselves of these resources. They're free, and that's what we're here for. I think what we're going to do now is open up the breakouts. It's been great seeing so many of you this week, and I know many of you were here last week as well. We do have some other events coming up in December, so stay tuned. Those are oriented, again, for undergrads, but towards masters in management. So stay tuned for information on that. Otherwise, I think we're going to open up the breakouts here. And you can bounce from one to the other. So you can go, if you have a question for Tony at Tepper, you can get that question answered and then bounce off and chat with Christine at Stanford or Catherine or, any of our panelists today. So enjoy. Our panelists will stick around for, 20 minutes or maybe even a little bit more to answer your questions. But I really appreciate everyone making time today. Whether you're in Taiwan or California, I know it's very early or very late for some of you. So appreciate your time. And yeah, best of luck as you head down this path towards an MBA.